So the death of the channel has been predicted on, I guess, many occasions over the last few years for various reasons. I suppose, in particular, cloud was suggested would kind of do away with the need for the channel, but that clearly hasn't been the case. Nonetheless, I guess the channel is facing various challenges. How do you see it? You know, what sort of threats or what challenges do you think they are facing?
I think the channel, you know, in essence, part of the channel, I think, you know, the legacy side of it, where, you know, I started my career in distribution, so I know you know, you buy boxes, you add some value in some way in guiding the customer what box to buy, and then you sell it on. That part of it, I think, is slowly coming to an end because it's been commoditized. But in my view, personally, wherever you've got complexity, there's margin to be made because there's value to be added. So the channel really is changing gradually into sort of more of a value-added consultancy, service-driven conversation, where it's about buying services and it's about buying access to experience and skill sets. So what drives people to spend money on IT is not because they want IT in their world, it's because there's somewhere on the end of it is a sale for them. So the experience and what we're seeing is people are less interested in what's underneath it now. You know, it used to be you said big IT teams and, you know, making big strategic investments in IT equipment and software, and that's fading now in favour of more agile services which can be switched on and off, scaled easily. And I think the channel's challenge, if you like, is to evolve into something that sits alongside that and adds value in guiding those customers towards what services to buy. How do you blend them together? How do you overlap them? How do you control costs, basically? So there's a lot to do there. So it's a complex landscape, and wherever you've got that complexity, there's always value to be added, and therefore value turns into margin.
Okay, and I suppose flip it the other way. Is it right to say that the channel almost has a unique opportunity in that it can be that, as you sort of alluded to, the aggregator of all these, you know, opportunities, services, etc. They can be the person, the organization that the end user turns to and say, look, you know, I've got this problem, I've got all these options, cloud, on-prem, hybrid IT, I guess is the catch-all. Can you guide me through that complex maze? Is that the channel's potential role going forward?
Yeah, huge opportunity, a lot of work to do, a lot of upskilling to do, a lot of retraining to do. It's a different way of working with your customers, from, you know, a point sale to, you know, sort of selling a particular thing that does one or two things, to sort of a broader landscape and really focusing on what's important to the customer. In that there's a service or a solution orientated conversation now that is ongoing, and fostering that kind of trusted relationship basically with those customers long term. So I think that's absolutely what the opportunity is, and, you know, there's a lot to do around that kind of retraining, reskilling, and building that value out. What do you offer your customer? You know, it used to be a bit of knowledge about products or licensing SKUs. That's still true, but it's more about how do you map some of these services instead of owning something, you know, paying for access to a service. How do you translate that into business value?
And the pandemic has had many impacts for all of us, but for end users, they clearly had to switch to a hybrid working model. A lot of people working remotely, and the existing IT infrastructure came under a lot of pressure. So was that, if you like, almost a dry run for this process, where the channel was seen as the, you know, the experts that could come in and help people, you know, switch the focus of their organization, and that's, I say, if, you know, that's the groundwork, and from that they can build.
Yeah, I think if you look back over years gone by, you know, there are always these big, huge events. There's big recessions, there's wars, there's things like this pandemic that kind of kick technology down the road a little bit, you know, accelerates things for one reason or another. And I think one of the key things that's happened is this, the pandemic globally has forced a lot of organizations to innovate in allowing people to work remotely. These would be businesses and organizations that would have resisted it beforehand for various kind of reasons, but they've kind of had to kind of get into this, and now the genie's out of the bottle really. And it's going to present a lot of opportunity, because I think more than anything, you've got data that's now disparate. So you've got people that have had to work from home. They're now syncing data up and down to endpoint devices. So there's a big opportunity in getting helping organisations manage their endpoints securely and in a performant way, pushing applications, data, and allowing people to work remotely. With a great user experience, basically. And then there's this addiction to video calling, very much like you and I are doing now. It's now prolific, and people that would probably have quite happily finished their careers without ever using video calling are now on these calls 8 hours a day, and they're very comfortable with it. If you take most of those people and put them back in an office with their devices that are all syncing data and streaming video, existing IT within those organizations is going to come under pressure. So there's a big opportunity now as we start to move back into some kind of hybrid office home working model, which is what everyone's predicting. I think existing networks and IT systems are going to come under pressure, and therefore there's an opportunity for the channel to respond, coach their customers into getting ahead of that, and being ready for that return to the office, making sure that the user experience doesn't suffer, basically.
Okay, and in terms of maybe drilling down a bit more into some of the specific technologies or new ideas, one of the ones I bumped into recently, the sort of the suggestion of on-premises, either co-location and or I think some of the big IT hardware manufacturers are seeing that they can put their servers and storage and stuff on a customer's site, and then if in effect lease it to them, I guess, and but potentially the channel can get involved, whether I say it's on-prem colo or on-prem IT services, if that's the right description. Do you see that as a good opportunity?
Yeah, I do. I think there's a number of different use cases for edge, which I think is what you're describing, edge computing. IoT is a big driver, but also again user experience. Content is a big thing these days. So content delivery, where we will become remote. We're pulling data up and down, but if you take IoT as one example, just one simple example, we're IP enabling all of these sensors and actors in the world of IoT. Some of we're sending signals to some to do things, but we're doing that based on data that we're taking off some of the sensors. A lot of that data doesn't need to be kept. So the logic in hoovering up all that data into big public cloud databases and trying to retain it for a length of time is hugely expensive. So if you can collect that data closer to the source and do some of the processing there and make those decisions, but just keep the information that you need for analytics later on, then that takes the pressure off the network, and that lowers the overall cost of sort of cloud computing side of things. So there is an emerging market there for IoT. But then also again in offices, we all know that performance over a wide area network, over the internet, for example, isn't always there. So if you've got big lumpy files, CAD, video editing, stuff like that, there's still a use case scenario for having those files close to the people that are working on them and collaborating on them. So these technology is caught up now. We can do that and still have business continuity and backup. But again, the focus being on only keep the data you need, do the processing as close as possible to the source of data, and then also really focusing in on the user experience. If I'm working on a 5 gig, 10 gig CAD file because I'm in a sort of an architect's office or an engineering world, then I don't really want to have to wait for that file to come up and down from some central office. I want it right next to me with my colleagues so that we can work on it. The business will still want that backed up and secure and looked after. But the user experience really has to come first now. I think people are used to now being able to work where they want to work and be able to get to their data.
And rightly or wrongly, when everyone talks about the edge, they seem to bolt 5G on you. Everyone says 5G and the edge. Some of the examples you're talking about, I'm suspecting 5G maybe isn't the solution, with lumpy. But what do you see is the potential? Again, it's been talked about for ages. Someone I was talking to the other day suggested there is actually quite a lot of 5G infrastructure out there. It's just the devices to be able to use it aren't ready yet. But what's your take, I guess, on that 5G landscape?
I think we're a ways away from it being countrywide. Obviously, I think anyone that's got a latest edition iPhone or Android device is probably watching 5G pop up and disappear again as they whiz up and down the motorways. So it's starting to appear. The masts are going up. What's it going to be used for? I mean, from a consumer point of view, streaming video is going to be huge. You're going to be able to watch things. Netflix and Disney Plus is going to be just as available on the train as hopefully as it is at home over your broadband. But in the business world, it's going to take a lot of the pain out of putting wires in the ground. Especially around that sort of Internet of Things type business case. So if you've got devices, pumping stations for water, traffic control systems, whatever it might be, you've now got the ability to send very, very large chunks of data up and down at very, very fast speeds in remote locations, potentially, when the network catches up. So it's got a lot of promise for the future, huge promise for the future. But right now, today, I don't think you could set out your stall as it's providing a service over 5G because it is still too patchy. But certainly we should be looking at what the future holds, and it wouldn't be, wouldn't surprise me if there are channel partners out there right now building their portfolio of services around things like modern marketing tools and footfall and analytics based on digital signage and etc., where you can actually push marketing messages to digital signage based on who stood in front of it at the time. It all sounds quite Minority Report, but it's very much here. Technology is there to do that. So as the network grows, I think we're going to start to see exactly what it can do.
And I think the end of that answer there, you alluded to the sort of artificial intelligence aspect of life, and it covers a multitude of sins, I guess. It's a big, it's a small phrase, but it's a big topic. Are there any, you mentioned IoT, which I guess comes under that category. Are there other AI type applications you see as having, opportunity mileage for folks at the moment?
Yeah, I think in terms of industries to kind of watch, I think one of the big ones that personally I find quite fascinating is the transport industry. We're talking about we're talking about sort of cars, self-driving cars, and platoons of lorries going up and down the motorways in the future. And there is no way that can safely occur without some form of AI in the background doing the safety checking and looking at risk, basically. And when you start to look at technologies like Waze and where that's come from, and you mix that in with edge-based computing within the vehicles, and then also 5G networks, suddenly you've got a eclectic cocktail of all the right technologies to actually make something that's quite slick and could work. So that the days, I don't want to say that we're all going to be whizzing around like George Jetson, in a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, but you can see, I think in the news this week I saw a flying car, so who knows? But I think we in the next 10 years we're going to see some very interesting things. We're going to see a mass move to electric vehicles, and we're going to see a mass move to cars being effectively rolling edge IoT devices where there's going to be some form of self-driving capability where we can just hand off to an AI-driven smart motorway potentially in the future at some point, where we sit there and switch Netflix on, and it'll wake up when we get to the junction that we need to get off on. Who knows? I think the technology is going to be there. Whether it comes to reality, I don't know, but you can definitely see the mix of the right technologies coming to there, and I think there's going to be a huge amount of opportunity there for channel. Because the processing capability and the networking capability and the safety checking and all that kind of stuff is going to demand huge quantities of investment in those technologies.
And I guess surrounding all of what we talked about, security is the number one. I'm not sure if it's right to say it's the irony, but the more we connect, the more vulnerable we potentially do become as well. And I know it's a massive topic. We could probably have another long conversation, but are you able just to highlight one or two areas of security? I mean, people are talking about zero trust, and then there's extended detection and response I've come across as another one. But how would what if there were one or two bits of security that you think need to be focused on at the moment? Are you able to do that?
Yeah, I think Securing the endpoints is absolutely critical in the next kind of 2 years. I think one of the things that the pandemic has driven is this mass push to people being more independent with their local devices. So some of that work has been done rapidly for the right reasons, to keep businesses alive, enable people to work remotely. And I think there's a massive mop-up job going on right now where people are going back and saying, well, we did that in haste. We didn't have time to do everything that we would have done otherwise to make sure that we were secure. So compliancy and security around data in particular and access to systems needs to be looked at quite carefully. And then all of the things that we've just been talking about around edge computing, IoT, smart motorways and cars, all that stuff, all that innovation sounds great, and it sounds really good that we can claw back those 3 hours and do some work on the motorway rather than driving the car. However, it wouldn't take a terrorist very long to figure out what he would do with that if he could compromise it. So I think wherever there's that innovation, that opportunity, there's massive risk. So security is evolving, and I think the kind of the SIEM side of it, the security incident event management side, is absolutely crucial. Collecting data in from all of these sources of data, sources of traffic, and making sure that there are trend analytics going on 24/7, watching for the patterns that suggest that something has been compromised. Because I don't think you can truly ever lock anything down. It's an arms race, right? And even people like Microsoft are infallible. This last week they've announced that they've just uncovered a fairly significant gap in their Cosmos DB database as a service, where people have been able to compromise and actually read and write data potentially. There's an exploit there, and they're closing it down, and that's great. But those kinds of things are going to continue to happen, and it won't just be Microsoft. It will be some of the other big vendors out there and service providers. So it's about watching and monitoring and having really good SOC services in place. And if you follow that to its logical conclusion, most end customers, aren't going to necessarily want a big expensive security team on staff. So they're likely to look to a third party for that. And that could be someone in the channel, or it could be someone like Node4 providing that service through a partner alongside something that they're famous for.
And when we're talking about opportunities, not technology, but sustainability, we've got COP26 around the corner. Everyone's talking about it, shall I say, more seriously than perhaps, in the past, everyone's thought plant a few trees to offset carbon, job done. It's coming to the next level. So is sustainability becoming a sort of selling opportunity, do you think, for the channel?
Massively, yeah. I think the challenge, and we've spoken about IoT today, the challenge is the amount of data we are generating now is prolific. And what's even a bigger challenge is the amount of data that we are creating, keeping, and never looking at again. And someone that I presented alongside previously, who was a great speaker, Matt Watts over at NetApp, he tweeted just today actually that the amount of data that we have created and are keeping has a larger carbon footprint than the entire global aviation industry now.
Wow.
So, and I'm pausing for effect because that's huge. Think about it. As human beings, we're not only cutting down rainforests, but we're now keeping stuff we don't need, and basically burning dinosaurs to keep it alive. So it's crackers. We need to get better and more efficient. So if you think about that. And then also, about the edge computing and etc., and the amount of data one vehicle is going to produce in the future. How much of that do we need to keep? So data management and pruning and careful custodian of data that we have to keep for obvious reasons. Looking after that data is going to be a massive opportunity for the right organisations in the future, I think, because we've only got one planet after all.
And is that a question? I mean, clearly there's technology that can help people, work out what they've got, what's important, etc. But is that also a massive education piece? Because for as long as everyone thinks, in a simple term, you can just take endless pictures and your iPhone store it, and you might get a message from Apple, for example, saying, you're almost run out of storage, but for an extra, 50 pence a month, you can have another 10 gig or something crazy. I mean, do at some point people need to understand there is this environmental cost to all this digital usage, and also potentially they need to be charged at a proper rate, so they do actually start deciding which pictures to take and which ones that they perhaps don't need.
Yes, I think there needs to be some conscientious decision on what we do create and what we keep. But also, I think it's just about being, again, we've always innovated our way out of some of these challenges. And I think it's just, that's where the true opportunity lies in industry, if you like. Why do photos and videos that I took 10 years ago need to be on nearline storage? They don't. That's just because I want an on-demand copy. They could quite happily be on, immutable offline storage, and I could ask for them back and they'd reappear in an hour. We might have to get used to some of those things to take the carbon footprint out of the equation. But another real key area to watch is Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. The carbon footprint for mining that stuff is huge. There's big farms in China, and if the media speak believed, hidden away in people's bedrooms, where they're absolutely chewing through electricity just to create these things. So we've got a sustainability responsibility in the industry to work out how we do these things without, essentially burning dinosaurs and using up all the gas reserves. But we've got to try and find better ways of doing things. And I think it starts with data and compression technology, retaining some of this data in a more efficient way, and just getting rid of the stuff we don't need or never going to look at again. It's probably one of the key things. Just being a bit more responsible as an industry, I think, in the way that we innovate is going to be key in the future.
And we've covered a fair amount of ground. So it's perhaps a slightly tricky, unfair question to ask you for a shortish answer, but what bits of advice would you give to a channel organization faced with all this sort of opportunity, all these different technologies? I know some sort of specialize on an industry basis, so they work in the health sector or whatever. Does that approach, or do you try and build a sort of end-to-end portfolio right across? Any sort of thoughts as to what approaches maybe work best for have the best chance of success? Yeah.
I think channel partners need to kind of try and decide what they want to be famous for. So what I alluded to in the last statement, to use that kind of US phrase, boiling the ocean is not really an option here. It's too broad. Not unless you're a very large reseller or channel partner. The idea of having expertise in all of it, you end up being sort of a jack of all trades and master of none, and that's not really what customers are looking for these days. If they're looking for security services, they want somebody that's got expertise on staff around that particular type of security service they're looking to purchase. If it's database services, so on. If it's cloud services, if it's cost control within public cloud, there's all sorts of different angles that you can add in terms of consultancy and experience that the customer won't necessarily have on staff in-house, and that's where you can play a very big role in assisting them long term on monthly recurring revenue contracted services that sit alongside some of these things that they're buying, maybe even direct from the larger vendors. So I think looking at it from that point of view, it's that reskilling and upskilling that I mentioned earlier on. Getting that right, being really, really clear about communicating what your go-to-market strategy is and where your value is. That doesn't then mean that you can't work with trusted MSP partners like Node4 to then add additional sell-through services that might attract additional revenue, because a lot of channel partners have legacy relationships with these customers going back years. So it's maintaining that wallet share with those customers means that perhaps there's some strategic relationships needed with partners that can provide some of that kind of asset or infrastructure based backup, like still having colo or online backup services, online security services that can be sidecarred onto whatever they're famous for, and sold as a value-added solution, basically.
Okay, and maybe as we finish, yourselves, Node4, are you able to give some insight as to how you work with your partners, and maybe most interesting, how that relationship has changed, for some of the reasons we've discussed, earlier on?
Yeah, so if you look at Nodeforce history, we started out with connectivity and colocation. I think we're known in the channel as being that originally a colocation partner with data center footprints that were regional. And if you look at how people have worked with us in the past, they would take those raw services, they take the connectivity, they take the colo space, and they would add value over the top. They would put stuff in the racks, they would sell services around it. And that's something that we still do a lot of. It's still a growing revenue stream for us. We're doing a lot of networking. I think that value added piece is still going to be there. I think what's happening now is that, as I said a minute ago, there's perhaps two other categories of services that are less hands-on for some of our partners, where they are trying to maintain that wallet share with their customer. And so, that cloud backup solution, it's a volume play solution. They will want to attach that to their Microsoft licensing they're selling to the customer or whatever. And that's something that we can provide because we have the assets. We have those kinds of services. So DR, backup, security, voice solutions. We have things like SIP telephony. So that can be plugged into Microsoft Teams to turn it into a true voice client. And that's something that is very expensive and costly to set up. But we did it years ago. We have the platform. So it's something very easy for a partner to come along and say, actually, I want to add that to this existing service I'm selling to my customer to make them more sticky. But it's a sell through. It's not something that they're going to skill up and manage themselves. They rely on us for. And then there's some more sort of complementary services which are directly sell through. So things like our voice capability, contact center call recording. It's not something that we sell to partners as a self-managed solution. We manage it, so it's a straight sell through. So for those partners that actually need assistance closing that piece of business and providing that service to sort of keep a competitor out of their, out of their customer, that's something that we can work with them on in a trusted manner. And a similar vein, security and things like managing Azure footprint and best practice within Azure services and AWS. In addition to database optimization skills and all that kind of real kind of soft skill expertise, we have a lot of that in-house on staff, and so that can be provided to our partners as managed services that, again, complement what they're doing. Perhaps their expertise is in networking and managed networking, and they're looking to just add that as an overlay service to their customer without having to upskill in-house, because it's difficult to provide those services.
Okay, so if I'm right, there's a sort of hybrid IT environment that end users requires the channel to become almost hybrid itself in the terms of how, what it offers itself, what it offers through people like you. So, sourcing the right solutions and not necessarily owning everything, but facilitating that, hybrid environment for customers. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, I think that in days gone by, a customer would come to a partner with a problem, a business level problem, and we would solve that with pieces of equipment, software licensing, and some people. Now what we're doing is we're saying, actually, it's going to be a blend of services and some people. And so, the people piece is the one constant here. It's just what knowledge have they got in their head, what experience do they have with managing and controlling these services. And I don't think cost control really shouldn't be overlooked. It's very, very easy to overspend on a lot of these consumption-based billing models that are available, both on licensing and metered cloud, etc. So getting that right and adding some value, helping that customer, keep control of their development team and what they're consuming. Otherwise, and I'm sure most people listening to this will have all heard horror stories about huge public cloud bills that have popped up unexpectedly, and there's savings to be had. So that I think there's a big opportunity itself. There is adding that value of what to buy, how to consume it, and how to control cost moving forward. Smart use of some of these services is going to be a key thing in the future.
Excellent. Well, it's been great to chat to you, Steve. So thanks very much indeed for your time. Thank you.
You're very welcome.